let's go to the UK, rugby in fact, where political analyst Professor Tim Wilson will give his take, and hopefully a new take, on what's going on on the borders. Well, we know what's going on, Professor Tim. We know what's going on, but do you have a background thought on this? Do you have a thought, an ulterior motive of what's going on, perhaps? Or what's going on the border here between Russia and Ukraine? What are your thoughts?
Yes, well, I think on the one hand, of course, Putin has behaved outrageously, a bit like a village thug, going around somebody's house, tapping on all the windows to see if there are any weaknesses, and also demanding the impossible. And without thinking, what he's actually done is to provoke a rallying call for the freedom-loving nations and for NATO. Now, if his goal was to intimidate, he's succeeded, but I think he might have had another goal. So on the one hand, of course, he's absolutely cemented his relationship with Lukashenko, his poodle, and in Kazakhstan, I think Tokayev is now very much on board, and at the same time, he's demonstrated that Biden looks weak and distracted. I mean, Biden showed his hand when he pulled the troops out of Afghanistan. And I think that probably was the trigger for Putin's maneuvers. He saw a gap, and he saw that other Western leaders, Monsieur Macron is interested in re-election, Olaf Scholz is still getting his feet under the table, Johnson comes across as a fool, so there was room for Mr. Putin. But no, this is really the crunch. So I said there was another goal, and I think Mr. Putin achieved this last week. So with all the attention on the Ukraine, I don't think there was a single newsroom that reported the resentencing of Navalny in prison. So Putin's aim was to dictate the agenda and to distract. He achieved this brilliantly, and Navalny is now sentenced for a further 2.5 years, I think. And during the court case, which, as I say, took place in prison, Navalny was spectacular. He called Putin the poisoner. He challenged the charges. I think specifically, I think I can quote him. He said, "How can you say you didn't know where I was? I fell into a coma. I was in ICU. I was resuscitated. I was then in rehabilitation. You had my address and contact details. What else could I have done to inform you?" I mean, that's what Navalny said. And he then went on in the most amazing language to describe Putin as a thieving man in his bunker. And all this went unnoticed by the West.
Okay, well, it's not unnoticed anymore. Now it's out there. Okay, that's good. I like that twist. Could there be another? I mean, I've always thought, Tim, and I'm glad you're on the show today, on the program today, because I've always thought this was a smokescreen. Now, I didn't know it was a smokescreen for Navalny, but I thought it was a smokescreen for perhaps another way to distribute gas or put his. It's always about money, isn't it? It's always about energy. I mean, all wars are about either oil or gas or building new infrastructure. And the only thing I could really think was that somehow Putin wants to levy his gas. Isn't that the case? I mean, he's never going to invade Ukraine.
Oh, I think he might invade the Ukraine. I think that's always a possibility. But real analysts would say that he would need about 700,000 troops to do so successfully. So 150,000 is simply not up to that job. It's up to intimidation. It's not up to a real invasion. So I think we can take some. I think we can see that optimistically. But so many things are going on here. I don't think Mr. Putin is motivated by money. I think he's motivated by power and by keeping in his office. But what's been so interesting has been the sort of the other things going on. The West's response. I mean, the West has sort of galvanized the whole enthusiasm for NATO, which we thought was as a dying dog, particularly with Mr. Trump's attacks on it. But at the same time, for example, in Britain, Johnson fielded Liz Truss, demonstrating her ineptitude for high office in much the same way that he fielded Priti Patel during the COVID crisis. Why on earth would he need to get rid of these people or even move them out of the cabinet? They're all jockeying for position to see who can replace him, and they demonstrate so perfectly that they cannot do their own job. Priti Patel is up to her eyeballs in allegations of bullying. Liz Truss can barely master geography. Nadine Dorries struggles to look coherent. And if Boris needed something to make himself look good, this Putin crisis is perfect. And if Putin is persuaded to move back, this only confirms Boris as a world leader. And actually, the other thing is the masterstroke by the CIA and British intelligence. So normally the intelligence agencies keep very quiet about what they know, and in this case, they went on record saying that they knew that Putin was planning a false flag scenario, talking about fake attacks on Russian troops, talking about the Ukrainian people mounting an attack in the Donbass region against a genocide against Russian speakers, and that there'll be anti-Russian demonstrations in Ukraine. So if Putin is outed as planning this, he cannot now do it. And no matter how great a tactician Putin is, and he is a great tactician, he is a Cold War tactician. These are Cold War tactics. And he also comes across as deeply corrupt. His empire seems to be built on deceit and other people's money, but colonialism is out of place today. And if Putin's plan was to stop NATO expansion, he hasn't succeeded. Finland and Sweden are clearly now thinking about joining NATO, and the Ukraine, even despite Monsieur Macron's plans about a Finland solution and Ukraine should declare itself neutral. This has now been rejected firmly. Ukraine was promised NATO accession in 2008. It's part of the Ukrainian constitution, and Ukraine is now committed to this. And this whole debacle has simply firmed up that resolve. And as for Monsieur Macron, he wanted to straddle the world stage. He saw a hole. He wanted to fill the place that had been filled by Angela Merkel. He went to Moscow, where he was dismissed as a lightweight who bored Putin on February the 7th. Whatever options he claimed to have agreed in that 6 hours, sitting across the most kitsch table since Disney's Beauty and the Beast.
I know.
Nothing serious could come of that, could it?
Yeah.
Brilliantly undermined by Mr. Putin. Putin at his best. Indeed, such was the setting. I personally expected a rendition of Be Our Guest. Macron was made to look like a cartoon character in a children's movie. Sure. He cannot be taken seriously. So in terms of the other players, these have been really quite well managed by Mr. Putin. He's given a raison d'etre for NATO, and certainly he hasn't achieved if his objective was to invade the Ukraine.
Right.
But I think.
So what is his ultimate objective then? I mean, every morning I wake up to the notifications of Reuters or whatever to a slightly different story on the previous day, and I'm like going, come on, how can I keep talking about that? And before you and I came on air today, I said, what are we talking about? And you said Ukraine, and I was going to go with Prince Andrew, but you wanted to go with Ukraine. And I was going, okay, well, I like the Navalny stance. That's good. That's a different stance to it. Great. But to what end? How long is this going to go on for, Tim?
Well, if we stop thinking that this is that Putin is playing to a global audience, the other characters in this drama are playing to a global audience. I think Putin is not. I think Putin is playing to a domestic audience. And Putin is looking for his next presidential election. What can anyone give Mr. Putin that he could not pillage and plunder from his own country? What can he claim? to his henchmen, or give them in return that he can't already give them now. And he built a bridge between Russia and the Crimea at enormous expense. It's an astonishing structure. It was overpriced. What does it do? He's prepared to spend as much money as he needs, not because he likes money, but because he is desperate to cling on to power. And he can now, I think, because of all he's achieved through these manoeuvres, I think he can assure the domestic audience, and he can assure his henchmen of the status quo and another election victory for himself and for united Russia, because there is no opposition now. I mean, even if Navalny could have been the focus of an opposition movement, he is now in prison for a further 2.5 years. That takes him into the election, into the presidential election campaign.
I like it. That's probably a very good motive at the end of the day, to sort of. I knew there was a smoke screen. Now we've seen what's behind that smoke screen.
Well, I may not be right, of course.
That's why we call you a political analyst, sir. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you, sir.
Great seeing you, and always good to talk to you. Looking well, sir. Stay safe, stay well. We'll speak again soon, no doubt.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.